Hello, everyone. We're nice to see you all. I haven't met you yet, but we're a pretty small group, so I'm going to be relatively informal, which is the way I prefer it. I do have some slides, so I'll share a slide deck, but it's probably going to be like really brief. Um, and then I'd love to save like as much of our time as possible once you get to know me a little bit to hear from you, get to know you perhaps, and then, or at least a little bit about each of you, if you'd like to share, and then also answer any questions you've got. And so as I go into this, just know, like, again, I'm hoping that at the end of this, it ends up being more informal conversation and less keynote speech. And so that'll be my approach. I'll just start with a little bit of background on myself, so we have a place to start the conversation. And so to do that, I'll share these slides. I'll start at the beginning would be good. So this is me. I'm Christian. Feel free to call me Christian. Titles aren't necessary for me. You can check out my socials if you want to learn a little bit more about me. I try to stay pretty active on most of them. I'm sunsetting my Facebook accounts, so I didn't put anything there. And I can go back to that later. What do you need to know about me? I'm from New Jersey originally, a New York City suburb called Teaneck. Pretty diverse, relatively middle class, but with also some racial and economic segregation in the town that really influenced me in my career path. Immediately as in like beginning in elementary school, I just had this real interest in like social stratification, like what's happening in our little town that the Black and brown people live on one side of the railroad tracks and the highway, and white folks live on another part of town. And then I started understanding class, like there's $1 million homes over here, but these homes are of less value over here. And so even as I entered middle and high school, like those were the questions that I was asking, like wondering. And so I started by just gritting anything I could around history, right? And that's what my undergrad degree was in, is history, to understand like how did it get this way? And then maps really gave me like some tools to start to do some analysis around and form some hypotheses around why social stratification, why systemic inequities. And then the PhD, which is in human development and family studies, I studied racial socialization and that the impact on academic achievement, because I'm still keenly interested in like how the education system socializes us into some of these things. And so that's my educational background. And then I started like my career in as a high school teacher. I really thought for a while that like, hey, if we can reform public education as a system, then we can kind of change the way people are socialized and we can change our country. And then as a teacher, I realized, oh, there's so many institutional barriers to me like changing things. It can be so difficult for that to happen because of the bureaucracy and the way that public and the policies around public education, which led me into housing and then led me into like going back to school to be like, okay, this is a lot more complex than I thought it was. And that's, and I really don't have any like analytical skills. It's not like my maths program in '98 was probably not like the maps program that folks had, where it's probably a lot more analytics. It was almost all qualitative for me back then. So I needed some data analytics and some better understanding of how data operate. And that's why I went back to school to explore some of these questions. And then it was utilizing those skills in a research center and understanding at the United Way how philanthropy worked and how public and private social impact initiatives got funded. And then I went back to public education armed with this new knowledge and skills to say like, how can we turn a school district around? And I worked really hard at that for like 8 years in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. And what I've learned is that big institutions are largely a part of a larger system. And you can push for reforms and the institution might make some changes and progress in a certain way. But if you're not persistent in those things, then it's just going to slide right back. And that can be incredibly frustrating. I've worked, all over, as you can see here. I won't go through everything. And then I stepped outside of kind of working for someone else to say, like, maybe I can create some unique solutions for specifically nonprofit organizations. And I've always been interested. I always have like some entrepreneurial spirit in me. And so I started a consulting company back in 2008 called CA Frank Consulting, just because I'm not very creative. And that consulting company worked with nonprofits to do organizational development, strategic planning. The theory of change there being like, if I can get these institutions to change and build a critical mass, particularly where I stayed pretty local there in Charlotte, North Carolina, then maybe, we can get a community level change out of kind of these institutional changes. The challenge is resource, right? Like companies would have to pay for the services. And number two is just, there's a predisposition for people to like seek services from me if they're already ready to change. And so I never answered the question, and still haven't. I still do consulting work, but I still haven't answered the question of like, how do you get an organization that doesn't know it needs to change to figure out that they need to change and then willingly enter into it? So that's still a question I'm working on. That's part of what I'm doing at Heartland Alliance as the Chief Impact Officer there. The difference is the CEO there, Evelyn Diaz, probably knows the organization needs to change, is invested in the change, but I have to work to develop a strategy and make a compelling case for that change. And so while I'm running that kind of career path, I'm also volunteering. And I will say, volunteering has been a huge part of my career. And if in any way I've been successful, then volunteering has played a big part in that success. Starting even as a teacher, I would volunteer at the local community center. I'd volunteer to lead a mentoring program. This is all while having, family and a full-time job. And then it was kind of board seats and in all of this in like different sectors, also in government and nonprofit and faith-based organizations. And every one of those experiences, to me, is just as valuable as my paid professional experience. So that's been great. Back to Heartland Alliance, where I am now. This is a little bit about the organization. It's founded over 150 years ago. We have, for the first time in the history of the organization, articulated a mission of creating racial, economic, and social justice. And so that's since my arrival last September. We've done some strategic planning. And one of the things we landed on is this new mission statement around justice, which is why I'm here and super excited about that. We do that by focusing on economic opportunity, health and healing, and safety and justice. And we're actually made up of these 5 companies that you see listed here. And I'll make sure that Ghoste has the slide deck so that you can I won't linger here, but I'll make sure that you have the information. My business unit, which I refer to as the Impact Division, is located down here under Heartland Alliance, which is like kind of the parent company. And that takes me to what I do and what my role is there. I talked about like having some connection to the broad strategy of the organization. More specifically, I sit in the cabinet of the executive director, or in this case, we refer to our organizational leader as the CEO, as a chief, right? And then I lead teams around research and analytics. We have a research and analytics team. That research and analytics team does policy research largely, but also program and evaluation, monitoring and evaluation work, both internally and as a consultant to external organizations. I also lead our policy and advocacy team, and this is kind of the systems change effort to change state policy, and we're making a shift under my leadership to also focus on federal policy in those 3 pillar areas of economic opportunity, safety and justice, health and healing. And then finally, we do technical assistance and training. So we also go out to other organizations to help build the capacity of those organizations, train them on some of the methods that we utilize and approaches that we utilize. All of this, again, is designed to lead towards racial, economic, and social justice. That's our focus. And it's my belief that Heartland's unique because we do individual direct services, like we have a healthcare clinic and we do homeless shelter services. So we have direct access to what we refer to as participants or program participants to do that direct service. But we also have this approach of like helping other organizations. So it operates at the individual level, at the institutional level. And then we also have this systems change approach for like these policies need to change in order for the system to change and for everyone to be successful. So I appreciate like this holistic approach to the work that we have at Heartland Alliance. I'll share this last slide and then I'll open up for conversation and questions. Like I think one of the prompts was like, what are the, what have you learned that you think is important to share about folks who might be early career? So these are my secrets to success, which aren't really secrets. One is like know your values and your value. So I talked about, and I don't think I was mindful of this or able to articulate it earlier in my career, but just this path I've traveled through all these organizations, some people would look at my resume and be like, boy, this guy has got some challenges and doesn't figure out what he wants to do. But every step of the way, it was about, advocating for equity and justice for me. And I found that there are some places where they embrace that. And there are some places where it's like, even though the organization's set up to do that work of working towards justice, they don't want to do that. And so now at 47, I'm pretty clear, like, okay, that's what I value. Like on my vision board that's in front of me here on the other side of this computer, like at the center of the work is social justice. So now that I know that, I know, and through my career even, like having that in my heart, even when it wasn't in my head, made it a lot easier for me to like know what I'm seeking out and what aligns and what doesn't. So know your values, and then know your value. Like, I just did a little post on social media around like self-confidence and just the idea that a lot of times, like I had a leader, a direct report of mine say, hey, I'm trying to help one of my team members become more confident. Well, to a large degree, confidence is intrinsic. Like we can influence it for another person, but we can't change it. So it's a choice that I'm suggesting that folks need to make. And I'm suggesting that you early on recognize, hey, if you've made it, right? Like this is, there's no more for you all. If you are an alum of the University of Chicago, then you've made it. Like you're the best, you're the brightest, you are capable. It might take you time to learn something, it might take you time to adapt to something, but you've made it. So internalize that, and you can do that without arrogance, right? But you can also have ego around it. So you've internalized the confidence without the arrogance. And so know your value, know your values. I use a colloquial phrase here that's scared money don't make none, which might resonate for some, not others. What I mean by this is you gotta take some risk. Someone said to me one time, like, if your next job doesn't feel like a bit of a stretch, it's probably not the right job. So to move further, like some people sometimes think, well, the next incremental step is this, or the next incremental step is that. Like for me, I felt like while the next incremental step in my career might have been like a deputy superintendent or superintendent of a school district, what made more sense for me at a given time was start my own business. Extremely risky. There was a time in my life in my 40s where I didn't have health insurance, because I made that choice to take that risk. But I know for certain, because I know my value and my values, that it was the right choice. And, so take a risk sometimes to advance yourself. Keep moving forward. It doesn't mean your salary has to also always be increasing. It doesn't mean that there won't be challenges. It doesn't mean that there won't be hard times personally and professionally. I won't get too into the affective here, but I've had some real challenges in life, even as an adult. And through them, what I found is like just my willingness to persist has been a huge asset for me. My mother was a school teacher in Newark, New Jersey, who retired after 30 years. And early in my career, she used to say to me, I would say, Mom, it's like really hard. Like, I don't know, I still feel like I can do it. And she would say, keep showing up. So when things get hard, just to your best of your ability, keep showing up. There's 3 R's in real estate, or 3 L's: location, location, location. And then I say there's 3 R's for your career, and that's relationships, relationships, relationships. There's that old networking adage, it's not about what you know, but who you know. I believe that to be true. I believe that there are people who get opportunities who may be less qualified than others because of the relationships that they've garnered. And in fact, your ability to garner those relationships becomes capital for you to expend. We're fortunate in that we live in a digital age where it's like, even in the midst of a pandemic, you could be on LinkedIn developing relationships, doing informational interviews, talking to people, just learning. And you'd be surprised at how many people are open to say, yeah, I'll take 15 minutes. I get a message on LinkedIn probably once a month. Hey, can you do X? If it's not something that's gonna like throw off my whole day, I'm happy to like, yeah, I'll get on the phone with you. I'll get on Zoom with you 15 minutes and talk through something. Just my way to share. And then finally is keep streaming. So I mentioned kind of the fact that we live in a digital age. Your networking is also digital, right? I mentioned that. But the other piece of this is I'm a person who's, I don't believe in kind of the marketplaces, like you get a job and then you get a better job and you work 30 years and you retire. Like we don't live in that market anymore. We live in it, and as you all are younger than me, and you probably know this as well or better than I do, we largely live in a gig economy where it's like there are jobs, but a lot of people are making livings through a hustle. If you got a job, most people have a side hustle. And we're entering an age where like content is king. Like you saw like Netflix stock jump through the roof during the pandemic. You see like an increasing number of streaming services. So I'm saying that to say like streams of like using the digital tools that you have for your career, but also imagine your career as having multiple streams of income, right? If you say, oh, I want to be a social impact practitioner, great. It doesn't mean you can't also own a real estate company. It doesn't mean you can't also do something else. It's like, so I always encourage people like not to limit themselves, right? Now, in order to do that, you're going to have to persist. You're going to have to invest the time, energy, effort to obtain the knowledge, skills, and abilities to execute on that. But any place where like you have an idea, right? I say it's a vision. Like when you close your eyes and you see yourself doing something, like you may say, well, that's not my job or that's outside of my career path. I really believe, and that, you know, I might be weird in this way. I really believe that those visions, those dreams, those things you think about are things that you can pursue and execute on. And I've done it. I've got evidence. I've got a consulting company right now. I've got a small real estate company right now. And I did not say, oh, here's the path I'm going to take to get to those things. It's just idea, investment of time and effort. And I really believe that folks can execute on those things. So I'll close with that. Know your value and your values. Don't be afraid to take risks sometimes. Keep moving forward. build relationships, and stay open to like multiple streams of work and income, because there's no reason to limit yourselves. You can do anything you want to do. So I'll stop there. And like I said, my hope is that we can, have some conversation if any of this is relevant or helpful. Let me know. I'm open for questions, comments, thoughts.
So
and if you do have,
sorry.
And I was just gonna say, if you do have a question or a comment, if you just share your name and like maybe what program you are either in or graduated from, just to give some context. Go for it, Michael.
Hi, thank you for doing this presentation. It's very, very helpful. My name is Michael Theodore, MAPS 2021, Research Interest, Criminal Justice Reform, Police Accountability, Policing, the Prison Industrial Complex, and all that good stuff. And my question is about networking. How did you utilize networking throughout your educational journey?
Yeah, I was terrible at it. It's only in retrospect that I realized, man, I should have been. I went to undergrad with John Legend and Elon Musk. Yeah, I don't know either of those dudes or anyone close to them, right? So in retrospect, if I could have, what I would have done is just like learn people's interests, right? So it's just like, even in your current academic environment, wherever you are, it's like, until you get to PhD level, at the PhD level, like everyone I was in the cohort with was like, I want to be a tenure track professor. So it's a little different, but I think you will find, particularly in a program like MAPS, right, that like all these folks have different interests, and just stay in touch somehow, whether that be, and for folks where it's like, wow, that interest is either aligned or could result in something, particularly if you meet someone who's like extremely talented. There are folks in my undergrad who like, I'm just fortunate to be connected with. I have no intentionality of my own, but who are just extremely talented and bright, who don't even work in my field, but I'll go to them for a professional opinion about something I'm working on. So if you meet some folks who are like extremely talented and bright, who like you connect with in any way, or who have a topic area, interest area for work that you connect with in any way, just be intentional about investing some time in the relationship. Again, you can use digital tools, but it's also like, hey, if it seems worthwhile, let's go have some coffee or what have you. I will also say this, and then I'll leave room for other folks to comment or ask questions, is ask people about what they want to do in the future, right? Like, now that I know what you want to do in the future, my goal is like, wow, like that, it'd be interesting to connect with some of our folks in our Fully Free campaign, and see if you want to learn more about what we're doing with Fully Free and some of the work that we do in safety and justice at Heartland Alliance. So just the idea of ask people what they want to do, where do they see themselves 10 years from now? If people can articulate a clear vision of like, hey, in 10 years, I'm trying to be XYZ, or I intend to have this, and that's compelling to you, stay connected.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll just say again, I didn't do any of that until my PhD program, and it's a huge loss, not just because of John Legend and Elon Musk, but in general, like that, it's a lot of social capital that I don't have that I could have had.
So while we are waiting for other students to ask
Sure.
questions, I can ask a question maybe on behalf of people who may be watching this at a later stage,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this will be in our video repository. So I'm sure you've been in a hiring position many times in your career. So what do you look for as a hiring manager when you're evaluating an early career candidate, right? Especially in the nonprofit and social impact space, how much of it is skills and experience, mission orientation, perhaps, anything else that you may not immediately think of? What is most important to you?
Yeah, I would say it's mission, or if it's early career, that it's like, yes, it's baseline skills, right? For any position. And then it's mission orientation. And I would take it a layer deeper to say like values orientation. Like, so to me, I want to uncover like achievement orientation, right? So there might be some informational interviews, techniques that I utilize to find out, is this person a team player? Are they a high achiever? Things like that. And I want to know, like, what are their deeply held beliefs? Do they believe that they're going to be successful? Right. If so, great. Do they believe that this is worthwhile work and have a vision for their life? So beliefs, values is ideally, and not to judge them to say like that's a right or wrong belief or value, but to say, does that align to what the organization needs and what the organizational values are? So it's mission, and even a layer deeper is like values. Yes, please, go ahead.
So Victory had written in the chat. I know that another student had their hand up, but yes, Victory, you were saying you had a question right after I asked mine. So
yes. Okay. Hi. Sorry, I can't have my camera on, but my name is Victory.
No
my pronouns are she, her, hers. Oh yeah, I'm in the MAPS program, and my concentration is sociology. So I'm really interested in racial and educational equity, in terms of dismantling the school to prison pipeline, as well as prison abolition. However, more on the educational side of things, just because I feel like that's where it starts. So in the beginning, when you were introducing like yourself and everything you had done, I was super interested, and I was just hoping if you could expand a little bit more about like your research and like what you did at the different institutions you attended.
Sure. I'll do a little bit. How about I do, if it's all right with you, Victory, I'll do like the end of my educational journey, and then I'll focus in like where there's alignment around the educational equity for my career.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you so much.
So at the end of towards the end of my educational journey, my master's thesis was the civil rights roots of African American psychology. I actually had like this Jones edition, this yellow book was like my Bible during my MAPS time. I still have it on there. That was my holy book. So it was just this idea that the African American psychology emerged as like a field of study in the 70s. And I argue in my master's thesis that like this way of thinking, which is really more about like more Eastern thinking, as opposed to like Western. What I mean by Eastern versus Western is like Western is individual, competitive, results orientation, focused on time, where more Eastern thinking is like more collaborative, communal, affective, more focused on those aspects than it is like more circular than linear. So like that difference in like the way people's worldviews are developed really became salient for African American researchers and practitioners in the 70s. And that I argue is the result of like, okay, we're seeing these social movements in the 60s, and then I even carry it to kind of the Black Power movement at the end of the 60s and into the early 70s. It's like, and when we realize as a community that like these legal gains are not the thing that's gonna like liberate us as African American people, then it's like, oh my goodness, there's something else operating here. And it is like, there's a different worldview. And so that's what I kind of studied, is these differences in worldview there in the MAPS program. which led me to say, like, okay, if we've got young people in an education system, this is my first job out of MAPS as a teacher at an alternative school, meaning these are students who are suspended for a long period of time for something they did. Everything ranging from I had drugs and a pistol in my locker to I had a laser pointer. And I got like both of those students are sitting in my class together, but they're almost all Black and brown and almost all low income. And so my thought was, like, if I can get folks to see, these young people to see, like, there's these different orientations and that they can move through the world, code switching between these worldviews and understanding who values what, then I could change the world and at least impact these individual lives. And it may be true that I impacted some individual lives, but I certainly did not change the system. What I felt, and then later on, as I did more educational equity work, it reinforced, even as I tried to make institutional and systemic level changes in policies for educational systems in terms of how they use data, how they think about students. What I've learned is, like, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, the same way we talk about prison abolition, which I'm an advocate for, we need to think about education system abolition, like, or abolishment. Like, our system of public education is deeply broken, and I'll say this, and then I'll conclude on this, is that all of this is rooted in a system of white supremacy, which is the foundation of our country. So if you go look at the history of how public schools developed during the Industrial Revolution, it's a white supremacist system, the same way prisons are. So that's where my thinking is now. And I still don't have solutions, but I'm continuing to work towards them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please. I'm afraid to mispronounce your name is why I'm not saying it.
Oh, no, that's
Yeah.
so fine. So actually, if you just look at the last 6 letters of my name, that's what I go by, Kanya. My parents just thought it would be,
Tanya,
yes.
nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. So I am a CIR, Committee on International Relations. Well, I can't call myself an alum yet because I'm technically still here. I'm doing a dual degree with CIR and Public Policy at University of Chicago. I graduate in December. I have a whole bunch of different interests, mainly underrepresented groups and the abolition of structural oppression. So the way that I go about that is I try and be very intersectional in my research and that type of stuff. Like, for example, in undergrad, I was looking at the Me Too movement and how it's had its effects in the military. Now I'm looking at familial separation and how that's related to white supremacy. So I'm doing a whole bunch of different research at different points in time. So my question would be that how would you advise someone to go about getting experience? Because, so as I said, I'm graduating in 7 weeks, and one of the big things that I'm often finding is that I have the qualifications, I just don't have the experience. So what would your suggestion be on getting said experience so that my qualifications match my experience and I can get a job?
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's so absurd, right? Like, I can't, I don't have a job because I don't have the experience, but I can't get experience unless you give me a job. There's another way in which inequities like manifest themselves, right? And this classist, racist system perpetuates itself because unless you know the hiring manager, right, it's all about relationships. And that's why I point to, like, volunteerism, right? Like, it sucks that sometimes you have to do things, like, in a way that's unpaid, and then, like, hopefully later in life that's not the case if you don't choose it. But I do like, my wife went back to school. She was a medical coder and biller. I will make this relevant, and I'll try and be brief because I know there's other hands. She's now pursuing an MSW, doing a career change. And for her, it's ending up being the same thing. She's wrapping up her undergraduate degree. She's headed into her master's degree. She's like, I got 20 years of experience as a medical coder and biller. Like, no one's hiring me as a social worker. And all I have is like, hey, where can you go, like during your program or while you're in your master's degree, where you can log some hours to say like, hey, I worked as this, I worked as that. And then the last thing I'll say is go back to my keys to secrets to success, not really secrets, where it's like know your value and your values, like continue to espouse your value and the experience that you're doing now. You sound like, to me, an experienced researcher. Now, you may not have worked for anyone else, right? But you can say like, hey, I'm someone just out of school who has no experience, and let that thinking and way narrative show up on your resume. Or you could say, hey, I'm an experienced researcher. Here's 4 research projects I've worked on under the auspices of the University of Chicago, for example, by the way. Yes, I was a student, but my work is research. So you can list yourself as a research assistant or a research lead or whatever role you're playing in those research projects. That's valid experience.
Okay, I'll take it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
just to jump in real quick. Yes, all of you have project management experience through the year-long thesis that you wrote, and we add that as if it were a job on your resume. So you were a graduate researcher / thesis researcher. You can call it someone else, as Christian, so you can call it something else, as Christian said, but that is a very valuable professional experience. You get very little handholding throughout that process, even just, handling all aspects of that research process throughout your year in our programs is very, very valuable. So that's experience right there. But yes, so Christian, now you have to choose from 3 participants who all have their hands up.
Okay, we got 20 minutes. I think I can get in. I'll start on the right. Caleb, I'll just go in the order they appear on my screen.
All right, thanks. I feel like I jumped in front of the other 2, but I'll be quick. I also had to step outside of the library, and so I look like a shade, and I'm very sorry about that. But hopefully I come through clear. So question's a bit personal. You can just reject mine and have more time for the others. But I'm a current MAP student, so I'll be done next year. I'm in the history concentration, but I'm really interested in anthropology as well. I like the hands-on field work that it does in community with people. So I guess to be determined on what comes from there. But I study English literature, especially African-American literature in undergrad, and was heavily influenced by people like James Baldwin. I did a lot of research on Langston Hughes poetry. And I have a lot of people in my mother and uncles were both born and raised in Greenwood, Mississippi. And it was really one of the profound impacts on my research, connecting this idea of Black literary theory in the wake of the slave trade from early America to today's ghettos. That's about all I can give you as far as what I'm focused on right now. My mother and I took a trip to Montgomery to the Equal Justice Initiative and saw their memorial to the lynchings in post-Reconstruction. And my mom looked at her county as the most racially violent county in the South, other than perhaps one large parish in Louisiana. So I have a strong family tie with my research, and that's the nature of my question, I suppose. Is number one, how have you been able to? I'm also recently married as of the last couple of months. So this is all this. Thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to flex, but like grad school and this idea of I have this family orientation that's been a big part of my life. And so I guess my question is twofold. One, did you have any strong familial influence early on while you were asking those questions in elementary school and on up? And part 2 of that is, you now as a professional, can you talk about know your values? I don't think I'm venturing to guess that family is one of those strong values of yours in your identity and in how you show love and in how you see yourselves withstanding. And so how do you balance that familial tie as someone who wants to change the world and wants to pursue this work in community?
Yeah. Really good question, Caleb. I am going to be brief, but if you want to stay on longer after this, or if you want to, I'm happy to share more. So familial tie, number one, and then how do you balance number two? So familial ties for me came from two places, my mom and my dad, but like just knowing our history as I got older, my dad's from Chesterfield County, Virginia, just outside of Richmond. My family there, when I would go visit, they lived on the land that was the plantation our ancestors were enslaved on. Like post-Civil War, my ancestors were able to work hard enough to buy land from a former slave master and live literally on the plantation still by owning the land on that plantation. I can go right now to my family's grave plot in Chesterfield County, Virginia, and see ancestors who were like born prior to 1865. So for me, it's like the line to slavery is very direct and very close, right? And then on the other side, I'm like a quarter Scotch Irish from my mom's side, who is a mix of European of various, but mostly Scotch Irish, African descent. We don't know exactly from where, but we guessed West African of some sort, and then and that's it. So that one quarter Scotch Irish changes the family dynamic up there, and she's also from the Philadelphia suburbs. So there's a whole different culture than there is in Chesterfield County, Virginia, than there is for a mixed Black and white family is the language they would use in Philadelphia. And so like between the Chesterfield County experience, which I would like assign to Booker T. Washington, and the Philadelphia experience, which I would assign to W.B. Du Bois, right? Then I find myself like in the midst of that. And it's both of those men, people actually, and my family have been really strong influences on me. And I feel myself, as Du Bois says, like two warring souls, like working hard not to be torn asunder at times. And then like my current family has always been a challenge. Like I grew up in a very dysfunctional household, actually. My mom had severe mental health issues. My dad did not have any kind of emotional coping skills, and when they got married in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, there was no psychosis. You were crazy and they put you in the quote unquote nut house. So like my household as a kid was not one where it's like we could have strong familial ties. So family to me is who I've made it to be, like the people I've chosen to be in my life. And I've chosen people in my life who understand who I am, my values, and they align. And so it's very clear where I'm trying to go and what I'm trying to do to them, and they support me wholly. But yeah, we can talk more. I love talking about family history. Is it Kishev? Please correct me.
No,
Kishev.
yeah, don't worry.
Okay.
My question is, okay, I'm a MAP student as well, concentrating in anthropology. I'm specifically interested in medical anthropology and the political dimensions of health and the construction of race, stuff like that. But my question was not super related to that. It was just more specifically, what exactly does the Heartland Alliance, specifically the company that works on health issues, what exactly do you all do? Because I do find myself thinking about working, for a nonprofit in the healthcare space after graduating from MAPS, and I wanted to know what the different organizations are about.
Sure. Number one, super interesting topic. I just had 2 conversations with family members about how implicit bias of practitioners influences their care of my specific family members. And I've seen the research about it, but it's really interesting to see it in practice with my family members. But the Heartland Alliance Health is the main part of is the name of the organization that does healthcare. And the main part of their work is federally qualified healthcare clinics. But they also combine that with a care coordination approach. So there's like food access, dedicated teams, on-site pharmacy and medication assistance, comprehensive services to meet every person's needs. That includes behavioral health care. And then they do like health care for shelter clients. So they work with people, not just who come into their walk-in clinics, but they work specifically with people in shelter care, like people who are experiencing homelessness, to deliver behavioral health care, primary care, oral health care. They also have a division that does harm reduction work. The executive director, Ed Stellan, has done this work for about 30 years, beginning in shelters. He's a very interesting guy and brilliant and loving and kind. And a big part of their approach is harm reduction. So the Heartland Alliance Health, it might not have been that name at the time, but they were the first to pilot the idea of like, why don't we give addicts needles if dirty needles are killing them, right? Like just this idea of how do we work with people to reduce harm? And if it means like we can't quite get them free of the addiction yet, or we can't quite get them to the ideal state, then that's okay. We need to take some initial first steps. So they are leaders in kind of the type of care they provide. They are leaders in the population they provide services to, and they're leaders in this kind of harm reduction, trauma-informed approach that they take. And that leaves us like 10 minutes for Alex, and then any follow-ups.
Yeah, I'm Alexander, but people call me Sasha. I'm a computational social science alum. And my question for you is, if you are a current student in the social sciences division, or maybe recently graduated, one of the challenges you see in front of yourself, definitely something that I can relate to, is how much realizing how much you don't know. So if you want to work in a kind of space that you work in, so impact analysis, social impact, in the general direction of decreasing the amount of world suck, there could be any number of competencies you could be working on, right? You could be working on hard skills, statistics, machine learning, computer science, maybe some subject matter courses you might be taking in the area you're interested in. How do you prioritize, if you want to be, where you want to go, but there are way too many things that you could be learning on your way there. How do you know what's, best bang per buck in terms of time and effort to get to where you are?
Yeah, I'm giggling. I'm laughing at myself because I'm about to answer this as like a real developmental psychologist, which is, the PhD is in. It's like, it's completely context dependent, right? So I do believe that it's true that it's context dependent, right? So you say well, if you have a sense of where you want to be, and if you had a list of like 5 or 6 things you can work on, how do you prioritize? For me, I think this is a completely individual preference question, right? Like I will share my opinion, and someone else will come behind me and share another opinion, probably, which is equally, if not more valid than my opinion or approach to this. My approach to this is, in my given context, I've got a list of things I want to work on, and then I'm looking for like, what's the easiest thing to do? Like, where do I have an opportunity to actually execute on it and complete it? If I've got 6 things and one of them's like, hey, over the next 3 months, I can get the certification, and over the next 8 years, I can get, this skill developed, or this racial, I'm going to get that 3-month certification, and I'm going to check it off my list, and I'm going to find out what can I do next, right? And I will say that I'm looking again to this board behind me, and I don't have any more like, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. I'm always just like trying to stay mindful and present in the moment. Like in my meetings today, what opportunities are availing themselves to me that can move me closer to my vision? As opposed to like, here's the 20-year plan and I need to execute on these 3 things over this time period, which is not bad, right? Like there was a point in my life where I had a spreadsheet where it was just like, here's the 5-year plan and here's what I'm doing over the next year and here's the 4 goals for that year. And maybe as a young person that's more relevant, I don't know for sure. But where I am in my life now, and I would think like, even if I wasn't a chief something or whatever, like have a great title, and I'm still not where I want to be. I don't even know what the future holds for me. I know there's more and I want to get it. And I don't mean money necessarily. I mean, there's like more impact, there's more influence, there's more opportunity. I want every piece of that I can get. And what I'm learning is like, if I pay attention to like where I am right now and like clearly focus on like where I am right now, I could do this, 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 and this, and really like change the context I'm in or change the organization I'm in. And then that thing will become a launching pad. I'll share one quick example and then I'll be quiet and leave some space left, hopefully. So I was working director of research and evaluation for Charlotte Mecklenburg schools in North Carolina. So that's one of the jobs in the school district where I worked for like 8 to 10 years. I led a small team that did all the research and evaluation projects, all the data analytics for the school district. And this is a school district of like 156 schools, big district, right? And so new superintendent appoints someone who had been a principal as the chief information officer. Now we are very closely connected to IT, as you can imagine, to do analytics. Like you need a strong data warehouse, and this is like early 2000s, where it's like the concept of data warehouse is just emerging. And so this guy comes through and he's, talking to folks, getting to know what's going on. And like 2 weeks in, he announces like 1-to-1 devices for every student. I'm like, this is absurd. It's the early 2000s. I don't have a functional laptop at home that I can take home from work. If you can imagine, we come and sit on like these big clunky desktops to run analysis. And not because they're high performing like the desktops you all have, right? Like just because we could not have highly functional laptops back then. And he says a 1-to-1 initiative, ideally with iPads, as iPads are just emerging and we didn't know what they were. And then I thought, this guy is stupid, or he's insane, or he's an egomaniac. It's one of the 3 or multiple. He executes on it partially. And he's immediately offered a superintendency in some other state. Like he was in that role for a year. He executed on that partially. He gets a superintendency. And then 3 years later, the district is 1-to-1. Every kid's got a device. And it's like, just this idea of like, where is there an opportunity for like, forget about the incremental growth. Where is this opportunity for like a structural change in how we do this? Is something I'm captivated by, and I encourage others to think about. So where you want to be right now, imagine yourself there and just do it. Like what's the big leap you get? I'm going to do this 3-month certification. Yes, it's easy, do it. But there's also a big jump you could take right now, I believe, that doesn't take you 8 years, that you can start implementing now. And even if it's just a beta test and it fails, there's learning from that, and it'll probably propel you to your next opportunity. That's my thinking. Again, someone else can have a different opinion, equally or more valuable. Yes.
Thank you.
Kenya. Yeah, sure.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, what would your approach be to decolonizing education?
Oh, come on.
Sorry, it's what I want
Like,
to do when I grow up.
You might as well ask me what the meaning of life is.
No, it's more just because I'm South African, right? So
I understand. Like,
yeah, so and that's what I want to do when
yeah,
I grow up. And like you have so much experience in education and
okay,
fighting the good
yeah,
fights that I'm just kind
yeah.
of like, let me get my pointers where I can get them.
So I'm not mad. I'm just joking. Like,
I know.
the so I love the language of decolonizing because it does make it international, and that colonial influences all over the world. And so there's two approaches, two broad approaches, right? There's inside out and outside in. I've tried both and failed. So inside out is that should not surprise you. Like, we're still colonized education. The inside out, and that's the truth in the United States also. Like, I talk about white supremacy being like what undergirds it. That's the same colonial influence. So inside out is like, where can I work inside of this system, right? Whether it be like a minister of education to say like, okay, be from this position, I'll have enough power and influence to gradually change this system and steer it over time in a way that is healthy. So that some people believe that's the right approach because you can't tear the system down completely because we're kids going to go to school in the interim. Other people would argue outside in is the appropriate approach. And outside in could be either like an advocacy organization that says like, hey, you all need to change education system, right? And we're going to change the policies and what have you that govern that system. Or it could be, I'm going to create my own educational system, which is what some charter school founders here in the United States think like, hey, I'm going to start a school and we can actually in the United States get government funding for that school through a charter school system that you could then like have more flexibility to create something that rivals kind of this colonized system. Someone once said, and I'm probably going to misquote this, so forgive me if you go search the quote and I'm absolutely wrong, but I think that the essence of it is like, you can't use the slave master's tools. It might have been Audre Lorde, but I don't want to say, you can't use the slave master's tools to tear down the plantation, essentially. So a lot of people make the argument of like, in any of those cases, like you're connected to the colonial structure, right? The power structure, the colonial power structure, which is going to make it difficult to tear it down. So I don't have an answer. There's other than to say there's multiple approaches. This is my first time trying kind of the policy advocacy in my current role as a means of changing it. In any case, it's worthwhile work. It can last a lifetime, right? And I forgot who said it, but it was like just this idea. I think it was, I'm saying Alex because I see it, but I know you shared your name different, Sasha. I think it was Sasha that said like, you know, just generally trying to make it less terrible. And I think that is very worthwhile work. Like, we've got limited lifespans, that's a fact. We're gonna have to work on something, that's a fact. Anything you do to make it less terrible, like there's incredible value in that, because you could say, hey, one of the concepts I learned, and I know we're at time, and over time, 2 minutes, so thank you, Gosday, for being patient with me. One of the concepts I learned in maths was about like maximizing utility, like basic philosophy. And so we could say like, as individuals, hey, we're gonna use this time or our resources, our knowledge, skills, abilities to maximize utility. And you may define that as like, I'm gonna make as much money as possible, right? And so it's like, okay, now you run a hedge fund, you've got millions of dollars, and you could define that as success, and like you've maximized your utility. I think that's wrong. And so I'm just advocating for any and all of you and any and all of everyone to be able to say like, what can I do with my life to make it less terrible? And I think like a move away from colonialism, capitalism, yeah, I'll stand by that. Capitalism, oppression, white supremacy, anything that pushes against those structures, I'll say American capitalism. I'll put it that way. American capitalism and any of those structures is worthwhile. Hashtag make it less terrible. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much, Christian. This has been amazing. This is a really remarkable level of participant engagement that we've had tonight. And that's all thanks to you and to your very candid and very informative approach to everything you said tonight, basically. So we are very appreciative of your time, and I am fairly certain that some of the students and alumni here will want to get in touch with you later. Is that okay? Is it okay if I share your email?
Yeah, I just dropped my email address and website in the chat. It'd probably be better if I drop my link tree in there so folks could see other things, but I'll send it when and if you email me. Like I said, I can spare 15 minutes here and there. My calendar's pretty crazy nowadays, but if you want some time, might take a couple weeks, but we can get something on the calendar or whatever you want. We could chop it up. Let me know.
Thank you so much, Christian. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight and asking really insightful questions. I'm always amazed at the brilliance our students and alumni bring to these discussions. So very nice. It's been very much a pleasure for me to be here tonight as well and part of this conversation. So have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It's truly my
Thank
pleasure.
you.